Hi everyone, Joe March here. I have some extreme weirdness that happened to me in September that I have to talk to you guys about, and if you're asking if it happened in September, why are you talking about it now? It has everything to do with the fact that my Realms of the Ancient stuff, my History of Occult stuff, all of my creative works were coming to a close throughout the end of September and October, and I didn't want to get in the way of that and all the videos surrounding that, many of which I had done ahead of time. So I didn't want to put this in amongst all of that stuff coming out because I just wanted that release to be its own normal, rational thing. And I didn't want people adding any of what I'm about to talk about into that and what was going on there. In fact, this video is being recorded in October, but I'm not releasing it until November, so what you're listening to is probably from about a month ago when you're hearing this, unless you're hearing it way later, in which case it's from October of 2020. Now, I don't know who is watching this video right now. I don't know if it's someone who's followed my channel for a long time, or if it's someone who's seeing this as the first video they've ever seen of me. So I'm going to give a little bit of background here that might be boring to those of you who've known me for a while. I was raised Christian when I was young. Eventually, I left that belief system and moved into something more spiritual as I got older, into my early 20s. I dipped in and out of spiritual thinking and being a more agnostic type of person, and eventually came to the conclusion that spirituality on its own didn't seem to cover what I was looking for. In my late 20s, early 30s, I got involved in occultism, in ritual, in magic, in all of that stuff. I spent about 8 to 10 years practicing that. I even had a YouTube channel that came out several years ago where I was explaining how to be involved in all of that back then. And that's what most people who are viewers of my stuff remember me from. This channel is not that channel, but for people who are interested in what I used to believe back then, my Patreon has all my old videos, so if you become a member of the Patreon, you can watch all that old stuff if you're interested in magic, occult, stuff like that. Then about 2 to 3 years ago, I dropped all of it. I had come to the conclusion, based on all of my experiences, that everything that was happening in the occult and magic was psychological in nature. In other words, if you go into a trance and you speak to what seems to be an external entity while in that state, you're actually talking to a piece of your own subconscious mind, and it's just a way to learn about the self. This is not to say that the occult is not useful, but rather it's a psychological tool. And that's the conclusions I drew after my 8 years of practice in it, even though some of the things that happened during that were really weird. So I finally let go of that search for God and meaning and all of that and became an atheist. I spent a good 1.5 to 2 years as an atheist. I even started a new channel where I explained, that channel being this channel, where early in I explained that I was an atheist now, that I didn't believe in the occult and magic in the same way anymore, that while it had helped me to grow as an individual, to delve into my own psyche and fix problems that I had, and made me a better person as a result of going through the journey, there was also a large amount of delusion wrapped up in there, which had caused other problems in my life. So it was like a mixed bag of good and bad, and when I took the bad out of it, I now had a good and wholesome life. Jumped to about half a year ago, and I finally accepted that I'm not an atheist, I'm an agnostic. I don't know if there's something else out there or not, but I live my life as if what is presented to me is what I do. I thought I was well and good with this. I figured that was the end of the transition. I have this understanding of using old occult techniques in a psychological way, while also living a regular life as an agnostic. Then in September, boom, world rocked yet again. So fans of my old channel know that when I used to drop into trance and speak to what I considered in those days external entities, one of the entities I worked with a lot was called the Morgan. The Morgan had told me back then that it was time for me to let go of my channel, let go of all of this stuff, which I have later interpreted to be myself finally letting go of all of this as some sort of a religious thing, and to focus on my work, my fiction work specifically. She wanted me to focus on completing this thing that's been rolling around in my head since I was a kid, this passion project I had for 40 years, which, if you've watched the videos from the past month, is what I've completed. She wanted me to go through, finish making my role-playing game, finish making the History of Occult book, which is also not only a lore book for that game, but it is a representation of my own inner conflicts growing up, things like that, and then to just get that done, because in her words at the time, that was getting in the way of the work. But here's where it gets strange. So what she told me was, you will be ready for the next big change when you've not only finished all of this, but you've reread the History of the Occult from beginning to end after it's already been published. And this is just something I noted as like, cool, whatever, and back then I just like believed whatever I was told anyway. I was like, cool, that must be the case. Sure, why not? And as time has gone on, I've kind of either forgotten about this, or when it comes back to mind, I'm like, yeah, but I must just know that when I eventually finish this work, it's going to feel weird to let it go into the world. I just accepted it as some psychological something. So even though the videos for all of that have just come out in October, everything actually got finished up basically in September. I was ahead of schedule, I was making stuff, completing things, everything else, and I was down to the point where there were only 2 more videos for the audio version of the History of Kildor. It strikes me now to understand, which I didn't think of before, that this audio version of the History of Kildor was me rereading the entire History of Kildor after it's already been published. This is the thing the Morgan was talking about, not just me rereading it to myself, but me retelling the story in an audio format. That this is the predicted moment. And many people at this point are either like, oh man, what's going to happen if you're in the spiritual camp of things, or if you're a very logical minded individual, you're going, where are you going with this? Are you going to make up some imaginary purpose that happened after this? It's about to get even weirder. Also, you're about to see why I didn't bring this up while I was finishing everything, and I'm only ready to really talk about it now. So in September, in the middle of the month, I lost my job. The company went through a transition where it was leaving being owned by one company and becoming owned by a different company, and they literally slashed half of the employees. It was kind of a luck of the draw type of thing. Nothing was done based on personal responsibility or what one had done. It was just 50% of you, bloop, you're out. So all of a sudden, I'm left with the situation where not only am I finishing the History of Kildor, rereading it, but also I've just finished the Limbo Imperial Guidebook, which is getting ready to be put out for sale, which is what me and my friends who work on ROTA agreed was the last book in the series of ROTA to kind of bring everything to a close so we can start creatively working on new things. So I've finished this series, I've finished the audio, and I've finished working for the company I used to work for. Also in and around this time, my wife and I used to have a second house. It was actually originally our first house, but we didn't sell it back when the market was bad. We started using it as a rental property to pay for itself, and then now that the market's been good, we sold it. So we've only sold it recently. So we sold this house, which gives us a little bit of nest egg in case something happens. We were going to put it into mutual funds and things, but we're not quite there yet now. So I just so happen to have this kind of backup fund that can support me if something like this happens right before it happens. But it also means we're no longer dealing with running any of that. So basically everything that business related I've been doing in life came to an end all at once when I finished rereading the History of Kildor. And I had to stop for a second and go, what the fuck? Now could all of this be a coincidence? Sure. My skeptical mind constantly goes, you're just reading too much into this. But deep down inside, I feel like this is all happening at this time as predicted. And I can't get away from the fact that I feel that, because if you do any studies into the subconscious, you understand that if you feel something to be true, it affects you. So even if I stick with the idea that it's all psychological, I still have to come to grips with the fact that I believe this. So no matter what I've said over the past 3 years, I still do believe this, and I know that now from this. Not only that, but now I'm questioning, is it right to believe this? Because that was a pretty interesting prediction. And if we accept it as true, instead of just saying, what about the coincidence theory? If we accept that the prediction is real, what does that mean? Does that mean there are actually external entities out there? Does that mean that there is some kind of a god or a unified force, like a collective unconsciousness or something, that you can speak to and interface with through these trance states? Does that mean that the individual person is able to cause change in the world in some way where I kind of caused this to happen? And if so, there's too many elements that lined up here that aren't as simple as just something that I thought would happen, so it happened. So it's made me question everything about all that stuff that I used to do in the occult. So now, instead of saying, that's all psychological, I'm back to I don't know. So that's a weird place to be back to, but then that itself is a change again. It's a change back into this thinking. But yet, I still stripped out all these delusional aspects that I tested and found to be wrong. So, was I going through a period of time where I was experiencing occultism and all that it is, then took a giant period of time to be super grounded and let go of the highfalutin, egoic self-views that were put into there, only to now be welcomed back in and ushered back into this in some new way? Maybe, I don't know. You might notice I put my old symbol from my old website at the front of this video. Is this a trend? Are you going to see that symbol on some of my videos going forward? I think so. I think I'm going to explore this a lot deeper, and as I do, anything that seems like it would be related to this video and what we're talking about right now is going to have that symbol at the front, so that if that's what you're here for, just look for the videos that start that way. So was I wrong in my assessment back when I started this channel that the occult and everything is just delusional and part of your psyche? Yeah, I think so. I think I was wrong about that. To what degree am I wrong? That's what I'm going to look into. And I hope you follow me on that journey as we do that together. There's also going to be some changes to the Patreon. The Patreon is still going to have my series Psycho Mind, where if you really want to see all of this unravel in real time, I did videos about this as it was happening in my life, and about some other really weird occulty things that happened to me back in the summer. If you're interested in that, straight off the cuff, when it happened stuff, the Patreon is going to have that. That's what Psycho Mind is. It's the instant something happens and I just talk about what the experience was. This is more like, hey, a few weeks to a month after an experience, what are my thoughts on it? People who join the Patreon also have access to all of my music and stuff like that. And I'm about to start a new creative project, but I'm going to work with my patrons to help me figure out exactly what we're doing there. In fact, by the time this video comes out, I've probably already started doing that. So this channel is still going to have a creative element to it. It's also going to have videos about this type of stuff now, but we're going to see where it goes. We're on this ride together. I'm not actually sure where the channel's going right now. I just know that this is something we're exploring as part of it. And I hope you enjoy that, and I want to give a special thanks and shout out to my $5 patrons, the Circle of Magi, as well as all of my patrons on the channel. I'd also like to give a shout out to you guys watching this. It's been a long time since I first was doing videos on this type of topic, and many of you came from the old channel and are watching now going, okay, cool, this is the content I used to like. Am I doing this content just because it's what people like? Not at all. A month from now, I could stop altogether if I'm like, nah, never mind. And in fact, I'm noticing how, as days go by after the situation occurred, my brain is aligning to this sort of like, oh, you know what, it could just be a coincidence. It's easy to ease out and to forget all of the feeling you have around something that happens and just get complacent in that it'd be easier to just believe X. And it makes me wonder if that's what happened with a lot of my other experiences. So another thing we may be doing is diving back into some of the old material. If that sounds fun to you and you're not already subscribed to me, subscribe. If that sounds boring to you, whatever, piss off, I don't care. I want to thank everyone for watching, I want to thank everyone for listening, and until next time, safe travels.